Here's Tumblr.
Oh my. Well, hello. This is Ian, and I have with me Tripp for the first time. Very excited about this. We are both wearing our Michael Keaton Batman shirts
No.
because we're talking about Batman today, as the title says.
Yeah.
Um,
No. Thanks for having me on. I.
yeah,
This is a topic I could talk about. Like, this is a character and a topic that I really find fascinating. Like, it borders on like my love of Lord of the Rings, honestly, in terms of how much I love this character. And all the ways that it's used in storytelling. So, I'm really excited to talk about it.
absolutely. And let's sort of dive into why we both find the character of Batman so compelling.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, Batman is he's a very relatable character in some ways, very unrelatable in others. It seems very real to as a character in ways that other superheroes don't really seem real to you, right? Like Superman has his own like kind of thing, and they're not as relatable. Batman's kind of broken, but also aspires to be something better than what he is, right? In a lot of ways. And I think that what's interesting is it's his limitations that he seeks to overcome for a greater purpose that makes him such a fascinating character. Um, and then the lengths that he could go to in order to achieve it. It again, I'm going to go Lord of the Rings on this. Like Tolkien with Lord of the Rings really made a point to say, don't seek victory at any cost. And Batman's always like running up against that because he has near unlimited resources, right? And he could do a lot of things that would be, you would say, totalitarian, unethical, and a lot of those things. And so he's always like asking that question. It's always like a part of the ethic and the moral dilemma of a Batman movie is, what do I do to stop chaos, right? What do I do? What am I willing to do? What can't, and he's always asking that question, and he's doing it from a very like he's obviously, like, his backstory everyone knows. He's very broken, like he's very passionate about this, but he's also like really hurt by it as well. And so anyway, I think it's a very relatable character in that way, is because we all have tiny bits of that story in ours. His is very dramatic in ways that ours aren't, necessarily, but it's very relatable. Sorry, my Italian Greyhound with his Captain America tag is bugging me right now. So
I think that's all really true. One thing that I really like about the Batman story that has gotten really politically dicey in the last, I want to say, at least 3 or 4 years, um, is that he's a billionaire who fights poor people.
right,
But to me, I think it's important because Batman is someone who comes from a place of great societal power. He is,
hmm
um, you know, America doesn't have royalty, but he is functionally royalty in
right,
Gotham. But he's lost more than most people, and people can say all kinds of hateful and stupid things like, "Oh well, he had Alfred, he had billions of dollars. Of course, he'd be fine because his parents have gotten killed." And I think that that's just nonsense. I think
No, yeah, you can't put a price on having your mom and dad around when you're
no,
a kid, like, and so like that's all nonsense. Which is why, by the way, I kind of hate the more common trope, and you saw it in the Batman movie, and you see it kind of in Joker, where the Waynes were corrupt, right? His parents were
yeah,
bad people. I despise that version of the story. I don't like it at all, because I think that it undermines the pain of this little boy that grew up without his parents, because now you're saying, well, they weren't actually good parents at all. They were bad people. And I think it undermines actually Batman's character in a really unnecessary way. Um And anyway, yeah, like I said, I just hate that trope. I
Yeah.
really wish that they didn't, that was never a thing that they did. Um, I mean, it's an interesting idea, but it's being overplayed now, probably because of the political implications of these were, bad. Billionaires are bad, and so we need to work that into the narrative. And I mean, you can make a bad billionaire. I mean, Lex Luthor is a bad billionaire. He's been a bad billionaire for a long time, but that's part of his character. You're undermining Batman's character and what he's trying to do by doing that. And so that's why I hate that trope, is because it totally undermines like kind of the raison d'etre of Batman. Um, so
Yeah, I agree completely because I think that the Waynes are supposed to be a real loss. And if you make it so you're
right.
like, well, maybe it was a good thing they died, you undermine the pain and tragedy that, as you say, they can so
or
relate.
they brought it on themselves, right?
Yeah.
Some of these stories are they brought it on themselves. They were in with bad people. They were doing
Hmm.
these kind of things, and it's just like, guys, like that's not that's a terrible it's a really terrible narrative. And I really don't like it because it's a if you're telling a Batman story, tell a Batman story. I didn't mind it as much in Joker because um there's an unreliable narration portion of the Joker. And then also, this is not a Batman movie; it's a Joker movie. And so,
Right.
like, I'm fine with you playing with some of these things, but like, don't do it in such a way that you undermine Bruce Wayne's character, because then he's not a hero anymore. Then he's lost. It just doesn't work for me as a storytelling technique. It's just really bad.
Well, something else that well, there's two things that really draw me to Batman from a both sort of a literary and as a spiritual sense.
Mhm.
The literary sense is Batman. They call him the Dark Knight or the Caped Crusader, and both of those tie him explicitly to that courtly knightly tradition. And I
Yeah.
actually would say that you can draw this all the way through pulp literature. I would say Sherlock Holmes is a knightly
Hmm.
character. I would say that Robin
A
Hood,
very flawed knightly
of
character,
course, and I mean
right?
Lancelot as the epitome of knightly character is so
Very
flawed.
flawed.
He brings down
Yeah.
the entire kingdom.
Yes, exactly. Like he sleeps with his king's wife, right?
Hmm.
Like this is Lancelot's story, and yet he's also somehow kind of the model of chivalry in a lot of ways, right? And it's a very interesting way of telling that story. These are anti-heroes in a lot of ways. And that's what I think is the most compelling about Batman. And I don't call him Bruce the way that if I talked about Superman, I would call Superman Clark, because Superman is Clark, right? Like that's what he is. He's small town Kansas boy who just happens to have all these powers, right? Um, Bruce kind of lost his alter ego. The alter ego is just like a facade,
Well,
right?
as they say in Batman Begins, it's another mask he wears.
Right, exactly. And that's what Nolan was trying to do with that, is like this is not something that he actually is. He is Batman. Like that's what he became. And this he is like just an armored knight. He might as well be like the knight guarding the bridge in Monty Python, right? That's who he is. That's all that he is. And Bruce Wayne is just a distraction from that. And in ways that Clark is not. Clark has Lois. Clark has a mom. Clark has these other things. Um, and so, it's a different exploration of what being a superhero is than what Batman is. It's kind of like Superman kind of inverted the trope that power corrupts, because it kind of said, well, what if like absolute power frees you from your fear and a lot of these things so that you could just be good. You're not worried about making money. You're not worried about, you know, protecting yourself. You're not worried about all those things, and it could just free you from doing that. And you were raised right in the right environment and those kind of things. Then, and you have like truth, justice, the American way, the right values. Then what could you do? Batman is the opposite of that. Is what if I gave you all the resources in the world, but no family? And it's a very interesting character discussion with him because he's he's just a fascinating. It's kind of amazing that we evolved to what he became, because the early Batman comics were not this, right? It's not what we're
I mean,
talking
the
about
early
right now.
Batman comics were such a mishmash of things that they really hadn't figured out what was going on yet.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no, so he becomes a knight, and he's going to do the right thing, even at his own expense, and even at his own loneliness sometimes, right? And it's just a I don't know, like, yeah, he is like kind of like superhero chivalry in a lot of ways because he is vulnerable. Like I wouldn't call Superman actually chivalrous because he's not actually sacrificing most of the time. Like he's not if he jumps in front of a bullet that he knows can do nothing to him, is it chivalrous or is it just like, me like blocking like a plastic dart from hitting my kid,
I
right?
mean, yeah, exactly. It's much more like a parent like making sure a kid doesn't fall in the river. Like you're not in danger, but you are
No.
saving someone. So it's a good
Right.
thing to do, but it's not the same as Batman, breaking bones to save
Correct.
someone.
It is not a knight putting his, like, life on the line to save someone who is vulnerable in the same way that, Superman is, and so, anyway, or in the same yeah, so, it's just like it's a different trope, and it's one that I like a lot more, than, a lot of other superheroes. So I find it fascinating, him, because he is, like and then the fact that, like, in a lot of ways, he was almost more successful than some of the other superheroes, not just in making use of his what he could do. Like he had unlimited monetary resources, and he's a polymath and all those kind of things. But he could die, right? Um, he's not Wonder Woman. He's not Aquaman. He's not any of these things. Like a straight up fist fight between all of these people would end quickly. But in the same way, like he built the Justice League. He was one of the founding members of it. Like he did things other people could not do. He um he also built like a team of people. And that's what's so fascinating to me is like you have this person that like borders sometimes on seeming sociopathic taking on orphans.
Well, there's where I think the knightly archetype really plays in because they are squires.
Yeah.
They are
Yeah.
the warrior in training who are inspired by him. And so a lot of people will say, well, Robin was just created because they wanted little kids to have a character they could identify with. And I think that's true, but I think that it
Sure.
actually gets at something deeper, which is that when we hear of an inspiring hero, we want to know what we can do. And Robin
Right.
shows us that.
Yes, and obviously the original Robin, Dick Grayson, went on to not become Robin anymore, and he became Nightwing, and he moved on, like he graduated, and then
Mhm.
Batman brought on the next generation
Yeah.
of like other Robins, and then there was Batgirl, Batwoman, Oracle, all these other things. In some ways, like he was much more successful at building a family than Superman was,
Well,
right?
that's partly because they keep retconning away Superman's family.
That's true. Well, they retconned away his family, but, like, building a team is what I like a makeshift
Yeah.
family, like a church family or something like
Hmm.
that. Like, it's something that Superman never really did, right? He's got Lois,
Well,
and
they're
he's got
trying to do that now in the comics with Superman, and I'm very curious to see what happens because James Gunn's Superman takes place in a world where there's a lot more superheroes. So we could actually see Superman in a much more leader context. Um,
yeah, and I think that Superman, the only thing that's ever worked for me is Superman as ethical leader, but it's almost like Michael Jordan was a great player. He's been a really bad executive in terms of like identifying talent, developing talent, doing all those kind of things as in his post-player career. And the one of the things that I don't think that we've ever seen with Superman is him really. I mean, he did it a little bit with Kara, but it really was kind of like flimsy. It's not even clear what exactly he's doing other than just kind of being a moral center for her, in the same way that like Batman's taking you along and teaching you tradecraft, right? He's giving you skills, he's making you more than you were before. Whereas Kara was already a superhero, right? Before, and so he's giving her an ethical center, and I think that Superman works for that purpose. But like Batman is almost like a he's almost like a discipler, also. Like he's taking like, and so like the Night Squire disciple is a really good metaphor for what he does, which is why it's interesting to me.
I completely agree. And actually, to segue back to my second point about why I think Batman is so compelling for me personally, is he's not just he doesn't just have that discipling element in the spiritual sense, but a lot of people have drawn out the connections between Batman and his villains. So,
Mm,
obviously, Batman and the Joker are both alienated from society,
right,
and Batman and Two Face both have two identities or two personas that tear them apart. And uh, Batman and Mister Freeze are both frozen because of trauma, like the trauma of
right.
his wife dying versus the trauma of his parents dying. All of these villains, almost all of the really
Clayface is an impersonator, and
yes.
Batman has this alter ego. Like yes, this is like a very big Batman thing. Is he's facing his demons in a
Well,
lot
and
of ways.
that specifically is it. And because Batman doesn't kill the characters, and that's something we can talk about
Mm,
later, but Batman will never destroy these villains. So to me, I see a really strong connection to the process of sanctification, where we're
mm,
constantly fighting our own sins. We're mortifying our flesh. So
right,
Batman has to fight his alienation. He has to fight his dual nature. He has to fight his performer side. He has to fight his, whatever sympathy that the villain is pulling on, um, because he wants to become better. He wants to make his city better. I mean, it's not like a one-to-one thing like an allegory, but you can almost see like a John Bunyan man soul image
oh
of
yeah,
Gotham as a person and Batman as the soul, the Christian in Pilgrim's Progress, trying to fight these almost allegorical archetypical faults in
right.
ourselves.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, if we started with like Joker, like what does Joker embody? It's chaos, right?
Chaos, sadism,
Chaos, and or just nihilism,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
None,
nihilism
yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
Finding good things funny.
right. And what's interesting with Batman is it's kind of the perfect villain for him because he has near unlimited resources, like we've talked about, and he could take control. And the Joker's the exact opposite of that, right? But in order to fight it, he would have to become a tyrant.
Yep.
To do often that's the choice given to Batman is do I become a tyrant in order to stop this guy, right? Do I bug the entire? I mean, this is the Nolan, Dark Knight movie. Is do I become a tyrant to bug all these phones to find all the things, and then um, I find him and I kill him, right? That's the option. Um, and he's constantly being tempted with that and having to resist that temptation to become something like to embrace an evil in order to fight another evil, right? And so that's always with Clayface, it's the same thing. But yeah, he doesn't kill these people because like they are in some ways like mirrors of himself, different facets of himself, but then also um like they're mentally ill, like obviously like all of these people have problems. Like Two-Face is not sane, Clayface is not sane, Joker's not sane, and so you don't do it. That's different than like Superman fighting Zod, right?
Or
Zod
Lex
is
Luthor.
sane, or Lex Luthor. These are sane people that are really really dangerous, and so like killing them is not a crazy notion, or even necessarily an immoral one. But like yeah, like Batman's villains are they are like kind of like they're character flaws in himself, and that's why he has compassion on them. He sees them and says, I'm not gonna do it. Like even after, so if you watch, The Killing Joke, or read the graphic novel, The Killing Joke, like the Joker shoots Barbara Gordon, paralyzes her, rapes her, takes pictures of it, sends and then kidnaps Commissioner Gordon, runs her through this entire, like, runs him through, like, seeing his daughter, because Joker's entire point is we're all one bad day from going insane, right? And so he's like, I can prove it to you, Batman. I will do this to Commissioner Gordon, and I'll make him go insane. Two-Face was an anomaly. I can do this with anyone. And even still, with all that, at the end of it, Batman doesn't. He stops Joker, like saves Commissioner Gordon. Barbara Gordon goes on to be Oracle. Even still, at the end of it, Batman doesn't take revenge. He doesn't kill him. He doesn't like he arrests him and puts him in an insane asylum. He sends him to Arkham. Right. That's what happens. And the reason is that Batman understands that these demons are ones we all have, and Joker's not well, right? He's not, and so like he needs to be contained, but he's not an object of vengeance, which is a very Christian way of looking at things. That these people are not objects of vengeance, but sin does need to be contained, and so it's kind of like it's an interesting part of Batman's story.
Um, I was wondering, what's your personal history with Batman? Like, how did you get into him? And do you have any favorite stories or movies or TV versions?
Yeah, well, so I got into him originally with the animated series. I grew up. I was born in the '80s, so the Batman the animated series was kind of like the thing that and which is great. The animated series is maybe the best depiction of Batman. I think. Um, that's not comic book related, or not a comic strip or something like that. I think that most animated stuff and all the cinematic versions have problems. So that's how I first found, like, kind of like started getting into Batman. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And so I did that. So like eventually, obviously, I saw the Tim Burton Batman and that kind of stuff, and then I got into a lot of the comic books, and the graphic novels. So I did, Frank Miller's, Dark Knight Returns, was kind of like one of the things that I was like, this is a fascinating character. So I love that. I actually thought The Long Halloween was really good. I thought that Hush was really good. Um, um, Yeah, I'm obviously the Nolan series is as far as like movies go, they're probably the best movies that are Batman related. I don't I don't particularly like the way that they portrayed Batman in those, because I think that they lose out on some parts of his character at the expense of others. I think Nolan did well in some areas, but it's funny that you brought up Sherlock Holmes, because like Batman is supposed to be a detective, and there's very little detective-y stuff in the Nolan trilogy, right? It's more like brute force, intimidation, and those kind of things, and there's very little detective work going on. And Batman's supposed to be the world's best detective. He's Sherlock Holmes with a bat costume, right? That's what he is, and also like Captain America physically, and all these kind of things. And so like so my favorite one, I mean, the thing that really got me into him was, I mean, I started out with the animated series, but then when I read, I picked up at our local comic book shop, I picked up the Frank Miller, trilogy, and I read that, and I was like, oh, this is my favorite character. This is such a fun story. And so, and I also like the idea of an older Batman, a more seasoned Batman. I like that a lot. And yeah, I just thought that was a fantastic one, and it was the thing that kind of rebooted Batman as a character, as well, which I appreciate because previous to that, you had the like Batman kind of died. You had the Adam West like campy Batman, and it just kind of went away until Frank Miller decided to essentially rewrite the character. And then it became interesting to me because I think that the earlier campier version of Batman it's just not interesting to me. And also like it's also like weirdly post Frank Miller, Batman's simultaneously darker, but then like Batman killed people in the first comic. The first Batman comic actually like so it's weird that like it's simultaneously darker, but Batman has more of a moral center in the darker versions of the comic than he did in the earlier versions of the comic that when it first appeared, which is interesting to me too. I
Well,
don't know,
it's
but what about you? Like when did you get into it?
so I got into Batman late. I didn't watch the animated series till I was in college, and so it's not actually something that defines Batman for me personally. I read a couple of Batman comics at the library, and I liked them. They were compelling, but I didn't really get into it until I watched Batman Begins. And Batman Begins,
Mm,
I had struggled my whole teen life with the question of revenge because I felt that revenge was wrong, but I couldn't articulate why. I
mhm.
mean, obviously, you could say the Bible says, "Revenge is mine," says the Lord, all that stuff, but I couldn't say why. Like, I'm not a deontologist, so I think that there has to be a reason, a telos, an end to why something is right or wrong. And Batman Begins explained that telos. It is revenge is selfishness. Justice is restoring community to functionality.
Yeah, when you say you're not a deontologist, like it seems like though that like you would wrap in teleology with ontology.
Well, I'm not, when I say I'm not a deontologist, I don't mean that I'm a utilitarian. I
Right.
mean that I am a virtue ethicist. I follow
Yeah,
more
okay. I mean, that's
Aristotelian.
fine. That I still think that doesn't that still broadly fits into deontology, because it's the nature of the being, which is tied in with its virtue, which is tied in its purpose, which is telos. So like the nature of the thing, the ontology of the thing determines what is right and what is wrong. And so it's not separable. So if you can't describe like a teleological reason why this thing is right or wrong, we don't want just arbitrary rules, right? And those kind of things. And so that's what you mean by like you're not a deontologist. Yeah, we don't want arbitrary rules. But I think that this all fits in very well. I mean, if you're a virtue ethicist, then you're Aristotelian, which means like it's the ontology, the whole thing is very much like it all fits together. They're not really separable. And so yeah, I mean, I think that if I'm hearing you right, it seems like what you're saying is I don't believe in rules for rules sake. And I want to make sure that I'm not just like blindly following a rule, and I want to be able to articulate you know the reasons behind the rule in addition to believing it, which makes sense. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
part of the reason that I contrast them is because I was introduced to my understanding of ethics by a contrast between virtue ethics and deontology. So I entered the ethical debate from the perspective that they are not the
okay.
same. I could definitely see how you can relate them, and it's sort of like most things where you try and separate out distinct schools of thought.
Right.
When the rubber hits the road, you actually start putting the things together because they're really separating out concepts that we have to put back together as an organism to
Right.
to function. But I still find that most deontology, like most utilitarianism, doesn't quite fit where I come at ethical questions.
Hmm. No, I mean, I think that I mean, it's kind of just how you approach it and then flesh it out. So I can agree that a lot of like people who like they're functional deontologists, it's just this is the rule. We don't question the rule. It's the rule, right? You don't do this ever, and you don't think about it. And I don't agree with that. But if we have a, I mean, this is kind of like, if we had God's eye knowledge, right? If like if we knew the thing in itself, we knew its ontology fully, then it would fit with the virtue of the thing. It would fit with the teleology of the thing. It would fit with our relation to the thing. All these things would also be true. And so I think that like deontology, because of a lot of utilitarians, has gotten a bad rap, but that's not where you're coming from. But yeah, I would disagree with the characterization, but I have the same kind of impulse that you do about like, don't just tell me a rule. I need to understand and be able to explain why this rule is there. The Chesterton's fence response to that would be, yeah, okay, but if you can't explain it and it has been the rule, follow the rule until you can figure out a reason why the rule is wrong, right? And so
Right.
that's like kind of like the cross between that, where you can say, well, like, default to the rule, unless you can find a reason that the rule's not there. In the same way, leave the fence up until you find out why it was put up, right? And so
That's a very
that's
Burkean conservative approach to reform. We're not saying things are perfect, but
yeah,
we are saying that if you throw everything away, you may throw
yes.
away things that we need to have everything work.
You're actually very likely to throw away things that were put up for a reason. Like, no one builds a fence for no reason, and you if you just go wantonly tossing down fences, eventually, like, maybe things bad happen, and in fact they're very likely to. And that's why, like, some of the rules around vengeance and killing for the later versions of Batman are really, really compelling to me, because he's just saying, I just don't do this. This is just not what I do, because I don't want to become that thing which I hate. Um, and he knows that it's a slippery slope.
Well, it's
And
more than just. So I don't 100% buy the argument that some comics have put forward, which is that if Batman kills, it's like a Pringle and he'll just keep eating Pringles. I
mm,
don't I don't buy that. I don't think that's morally realistic. Batman doesn't function like a serial killer. Um, I mean, you can sort of make some claims about his obsessiveness, but serial killers have a very specific type of progression from, fantasies and then killing animals, then killing people. And, you know, that's not how Batman would function.
no,
What I do think is what you said before, which is if Batman decides he is the judge, jury, and executioner, he's become a tyrant. He's
yes,
become the ruler of Gotham City, and if he leaves, there will be nothing else.
right,
He is not attempting to put himself at the center of the city. He's
no,
attempting to try and restore it to functionality so that little boys don't have their parents murdered in front of them like his were.
right. Right, and then that's why he was so hopeful about, like, his relationship with Harvey Dent. He wanted to.
Mhm.
I mean, Nolan didn't get that part wrong. That was the goal, is to work with Harvey Dent, bankroll him, have him start prosecuting some of these crime families, and eventually not have to do this. And so that very much was what his motivation was. Yeah, he doesn't want to become a tyrant, and also there is like a sense, though, that where you could say, well, did that. Like, it's kind of like any sin.
I think I
Once,
missed what you just said. Could you
oh,
restate?
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of like, so anyway, so yes, he doesn't want to become a tyrant. He's worried about that. And he very easily could. If, but then also, then there's a sense of, okay, it's kind of like I mean, again, this is like a Noah story, right? So what did Noah do whenever he got off the ark, right? What is his first thing you do? Plant a vineyard, right? Then you water the vineyard, then you get the grapes, and then you like, so you take these little steps, right? And then there's proverbs about, you know, sitting with sinners or walking with them, and there's this kind of like progression. And so there's a sense where also I think that he's worried that once you take that first step and I'm willing to kill when it's not even if it's justified, it's not necessary, that it'll be easier the next time to make that same decision, right? And you'll become desensitized to it. So I don't think that like he's just gonna like go around and start killing. He's gonna become Azrael or the Punisher or any of these other characters.
Azrael.
Yeah. So he's not gonna become them. But will he maybe rush to judgment? Maybe. And I think he's worried about that. I think he's worried about his own power. And so that's part of it's kind of like the mirror of I mean, it's kind of like it's tied to that tyrant thing. He's worried about the power and whether or not he'll become desensitized to it. And so I think he's like the later versions, he just makes rules. I'm not going to do this. And do I think he would never do it in any circumstance if he had no other choice? No. I think that he would, but it would have to be a very dire situation for him to do
Well,
it.
and I think that too many writers these days try and force him into a situation where the only right or narratively satisfying outcome would be for him to kill the villain, and then he doesn't because that's his rule. And I think that
Yeah, I don't like that. Yeah.
that mistakes the purpose of Batman and the purpose of his decision not to kill. It's sort of like people who are like, well, the Punisher should kill an innocent person because then we get interesting ethical dilemmas. Like, no, you wouldn't.
No.
You would not. That's it's not the point. And interestingly, I'm not against heroes who kill. Like most of the Marvel heroes, both in um, the movies and in the current comics, because they're kind of driven by the movies now. A lot of the heroes kill. Spider-Man still doesn't, but that's because I think Spider-Man's so tied to that teen coming of age
Yeah,
symbol.
it would be weird to see like a 13-year-old or 14, 15, whatever he is,
Well, I mean, he's
boy,
26
like,
now, but he's still the symbol of that transition. And
right.
you don't want to teach kids, especially young men, that a sign of becoming a man is killing someone. Like, no.
Yeah.
But like Captain America, he's a soldier and he
Right.
kills enemy soldiers.
No, it totally fits his character.
And they're
For
also
him to
part
be
of the
willing to
structure
kill.
of society. So Batman is
Yeah.
explicitly outside of
Right.
society.
He's operating outside of the rules of law
Right.
explicitly
Because
in
the
ways
law
that
is
Superman's
broken
not.
in
Yes.
Gotham. Like that's an important thing that I think people need to remember about Gotham. Gotham's not a real city. Gotham is a broken nightmare of New York at night. And
Right.
it's kind of funny because there were times when New York was as dangerous as Gotham was. Like Frank Miller wrote The Dark Knight Returns after he got mugged like 3 times in a year. Like New
Right.
York used to be just awful to live in.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately
No.
getting that way again too, but that's a different
Right.
conversation.
No, yeah, it's going the wrong way for sure. No, I agree. And even in some modern versions of Batman, especially some of the Justice League stuff, Batman does kill. He not people typically, but like he will kill like other beings, and so like there's an animated version of Justice League. I think it's called War. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen that one.
It's pretty good. So basically, it's a story of Kara coming to Earth, Supergirl, and kind of learning the ropes and that kind of stuff, and being like kind of mentored by Clark. Um, she ends up going to stay with Wonder Woman, the Amazonians for a little bit, and be trained and all this kind of stuff. But she ends up getting captured by Darkseid.
Actually, I think this is a different.
It might not be
Because
War.
I have seen that movie, and I'm pretty sure it's called something. What is it called? I think it's Batman Superman Doomsday. It was one of the earliest ones, and I thought it was actually pretty. Oh, Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. That's what it was.
Apocalypse. Yeah. So not war.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
that's a pretty good one. I do recommend it.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. I liked it. And so anyway, so like, but there's this whole thing like, okay, so now they have to go and rescue Kara because Darkseid is brainwashing her and training her essentially to be like his warlord in his future invasion of Earth, right? So Earth's at risk, and this is no longer a protect Gotham from criminals problem. This is a like he's going to invade Earth and we're all going to die problem, right? And so the Justice League goes, and so they all have their own jobs, right? So they all split up and they're fighting different people and that kind of stuff. Batman goes and hacks in to some of the armaments, the hell spores of Darkseid that he uses to kind of nuke planets, and then goes directly to Darkseid and just says, I've got your hell spores. I'm ready to press the button right now and just kill everything on this planet, including you." Um, and Darkseid throws him around a little bit, beats him, tries to intimidate him, and Batman just wouldn't yield. And basically, at the end, Darkseid says, "Well played. If it was the Amazonian or the Kryptonian that had come here to make that threat, I wouldn't have believed them." He's like, "But I believe that you would actually do this." And so then he lets him go. He lets Kara go, and then end of the movie. But
And
after
by the
he
way, the
comes,
fight between Wonder Woman and the Furies has some of the best animation I've
oh,
seen.
it's great.
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
the Fury stuff was absolutely. I don't the what's the Granny is
Granny
weird.
Goodness.
Yeah, Granny Goodness is weird in that one. But anyway,
She's always weird.
yeah,
That's
like,
what's
it's
kind
just
of
a
typical
weird
of her.
character. I don't really understand that character very much. But anyway, but like so like even in some of the versions of Batman, like he'll do it, but it is absolutely last resort. It is like planet killing, we're all gonna die kind of thing. It's not just I'm not gonna kill because that's my rule. But with some of these mentally ill people, like the Joker is a menace. He's not a threat to the planet, right? Like Joker's
Well,
not.
there have been stories where he has, but normally, yes.
Well, yeah, but generally speaking, like the Joker is just kind of like going around Gotham, and I mean, he's killing people, and it's dangerous, but it's not like he's not taking over the world, right? And if he did, then he would run into. I mean, it's not like Lex Luthor is a bad guy, but it's not like Lex Luthor wants any part of a Joker run planet and that kind of thing. So it doesn't even make sense for him to take over the world because he's going to run into all other kinds of villains that are like, no, I don't want this lunatic running things. Um, and so anyway, Ra's al Ghul, like doesn't want the Joker to do things. Anyway, so like that's the thing. Like Batman, he doesn't kill because the criminals that he's facing, generally speaking, are his own demons, and so that's archetypically perfect for a narrative. And so he wants to. It's kind of like the Jordan Peterson, like kind of integrate your shadow kind of idea. Like he doesn't want to kill it. He wants to own the problem. Um, and then secondarily, like it's not about revenge. It's not about any of that, and I think that he's just reluctant to become a tyrant to do some of these things. But when he's fighting Darkseid on Apocalypse, there's no danger of becoming a tyrant of that planet, right? That you've already got one, and
Yep.
so like it's not like that's going to be a problem. So it's just like he's a complicated character. I like the I like that. I like it when writers. I don't like it when it's like, okay, Batman should totally kill this guy, and he's like, I won't do it. And you're like, I mean, okay, but you need to set up the story better so that Batman is doing it for an explicit reason other than I just don't kill people. And I think that's a very weak way of telling that story.
Well, and there's been some really good stories lately that I think poke at exactly why. There's one where Batman, it was explicitly an homage to 12 Angry Men. Bruce Wayne bribes his way onto a jury because Batman because he was unbalanced, and it's part of a larger arc, but he's in an unbalanced state. He puts Mr. Freeze in jail incorrectly because Mr. Freeze is framed. So Bruce Wayne has to save Batman. He has to make a speech to the jury to convince them that Batman made a mistake. And I really love that one because it is about, those rules and the the things that fall through the cracks between those rules sometimes. And
Mm,
also, there was another writer a couple years later did a story about a young kid. So many of the kids who are inspired by Batman become Robin, and they have those rules. I mean, some of them like Jason Todd become, he's killed and he comes back and he kills a lot of people. But
right.
most of the Robins believe in what Batman believes. But then there's some kids who are the Joker kills their family in front of them and they start killing other people.
Right.
Um, and so Batman had to come into that boy's life and say, no, I know the pain you're going through because I lost my family too, but there's a better way than just lashing out and slaughtering people who are doing bad things.
Well,
And
and then there's other people that didn't have like necessarily that like kind of like traumatic, like their parents got killed, but like his own son, Damian Wayne,
mhm.
right? Like
Well, he was raised to kill.
he was raised to kill. He was taught to kill. He was like trained to do it by Ra's al Ghul, and his demented mother, um, Talia. And so like you know, but Batman still made him Robin, right? He still took him in and taught him, no, there's a better way to live than this. And so that's what's interesting to me about Batman is because he's in some ways he's a loner, but then also he has this like bat family that he's been raising of misfit toys that are all doing good work, right?
Well, and
They're all
what's so important to me about Robin is that they are Batman healing what he lost with his parents. He is
right.
forming a family again. And so I get really irritated with a lot of fans who are like, Batman should be alone. He shouldn't have these kids. I'm like,
No,
no, Batman exists to inspire people to join and heal communities, heal families again. And if
right.
you miss that, and even though Nolan tended to, it's difficult to do a hyper realistic Batman
It
with a
is.
Robin, but he still had that inspirational aspect in that film, both with the character of John Blake and with the redemption of Catwoman and with all the little kids who were drawing bats. Like all of that is inspiration, which I think is one of the key points of Batman.
See, I think you actually could do a really good Batman movie as long as you didn't do the campy like George Clooney
Schumacher.
kind, yeah, like Joel Schumacher. Because I actually think that would be a really interesting story if you
I
like
agree, and I'm actually
instead of
excited that they are doing a Robin in the next Batman,
yeah. So
the
like
new Batman.
that's great because I think that would be a really interesting kind of father son, father adopted son dynamic where this kid has gone through a lot. He's got a lot of anger, but then also he kind of like admires Batman and what he's doing and kind of wants to be like him in a lot of ways. And then it's a matter of like developing that relationship. And it could just be a relationship story. We don't need like Gotham is gonna get blown up tomorrow kind of stuff. Like it could just be like a simple like, you know, it could be a simple like solving a heist story. It could be a simple like murder solution, like kind of thriller or something like that, where you're teaching like where but the point it's I'm a big fan. I don't know about you. I'm a big fan of character drive story rather than plot drive story. And so, like, what I really want is them to make a character drive story of father son relationship between a Batman and a Robin. I don't care. It doesn't need to be a boy. I mean, I like Carrie Kelly as a character in, The Dark Knight
I mean, my favorite
Returns.
character is Stephanie Brown, and she was also Robin. So
Yeah, so like I'm fine with Carrie Kelly that you could do that too. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. It could be Jason Todd, could be Dick Grayson, whatever.
although I would
But have
prefer it
that.
not to be Turner Hayes, the made-up character for the recent television show that thankfully was
Yeah.
canceled.
Yes, yes. No, I don't want yeah. No, like, you guys gotta prove to me you can write a good story before you can, like, shove in yet another Robin because 'cause there's been plenty. So, like, do that, and then, And then if it's successful, then like if you did Dick Grayson, for instance, do that, and it can be just a very simple. We're teaching him the ropes,
And
right?
then we can have a Nightwing movie.
And then we could have a Nightwing movie. But these people have no vision and they don't understand their own characters, right?
Yeah.
And so, but like that would be a fantastic way of doing it. Is just set that up and just make it a, hey, the bank got robbed. And like set it up so that you have half the story is essentially just Dick Grayson had this traumatic experience, and Bruce Wayne slash Batman takes him under his wing, and Dick Grayson has this like starry eyed look at him, but he's also very angry at you know a lot of stuff, and maybe you change Dick Grayson's backstory a little bit so that his parents don't die in an accident. Maybe it's like something else. You could do that, or you could just do Jason Todd or whatever it is. We don't really know Carrie Kelly's backstory. She just kind of like shows up and it likes Batman, right? So you could give her something interesting with and wouldn't even change the Frank Miller novel all that much. And so you could do something like that where half the story is just like essentially like kind of father adopted child, like bringing them along and teaching them to be virtuous while solving a crime, right? Like
Yeah.
that's like just make it a thriller like that. It doesn't need like yeah, you can throw in some action scenes and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't have to be like a Joker related thing. Make it some like it could just be like a Falcone crime family. Like they robbed the bank or they killed a guy, they killed the mayor, they did something like that, and you're trying to figure it out. So it's part detective, part thriller, part like heart like kind of relationship building for this character. And if you did it with Dick Grayson, then yeah, like you said, like then the next movie is Dick Grayson goes out on his own and he's like operating as Nightwing and that kind of stuff. And and you can bring Batman in for like some cameos or, you know, Dick, you're in over your skis kind of thing. You're doing like that. So it's like a whole character arc that you could do, but they don't know how to tell these stories. It's baffling to me. I don't even think they like the characters. I don't think they like or understand the characters.
Well, it's so tricky because I think it's not necessary. I think some of them don't like the character, but I think for some things it's because they desperately want to tell a Batman story, but they don't have the permissions or rights because the rights are tied up in a bunch of different deals, and so they're pieced together. And you can have rights to this character, but not this character, and it's just a
Yeah,
mess.
maybe, but like no one has rights to Batman and not Robin,
Right. But some
right?
people have rights to Robin and not Batman, and that's where I think we got the
Yeah, maybe.
terrible Gotham Knight
And
show.
me, okay, but like Marvel worked it out with Spider-Man and Sony, right? Like you can do it,
You just
and
have
we
to
will.
have a vision, and I think James Gunn and whoever well, the problem is that James Gunn hired Andy Muschietti to do it, and I don't actually dislike. Did you see the Flash?
I did, yes.
Okay, so I didn't dislike the Batman parts, either the Ben Affleck or the Michael Keaton parts
I thought the
of the
Ben Affleck
Flash.
parts were fine. I think that my problem is I think Michael Keaton's actually the worst Batman. Other than
Interesting. Who is the best of the live action Batmans?
we'll forget, okay, because like that was nonsense. Um, I think that actually Ben Affleck is probably my favorite like live action Batman. I think that like he actually did detective-y things in the
I'm
movie,
really
which I like.
curious to
I
hear
like
what you
and
think about, because Ben Affleck is most directly inspired by The Dark Knight Returns, both the way his costume is and the
okay. Well,
visuals.
sorry, 1 second. Yeah, I can take it if you want. Sorry, my wife was asking me if I'm going to take the dogs to bed whenever I go up. So yeah, she's sleeping right now. My other dog. Um, sorry, go ahead. I missed that.
So I'm curious to know, Ben Affleck is the most directly inspired by The Dark Knight Returns. Is that part of, do you like appreciate that part of the inspiration of that portrayal?
I so there's a couple things that I like. I do like I said, I like the older, more seasoned Batman who's just kind of like a little bit cynical, and just kind of like those kind of things, and him working through that cynicism. as a character arc. I think that that really works for Batman because if you could imagine if you spent your life to try and clean up this city, and at the end of it, you're just it's still a mess, right? And now, I like that, and then him saying, "Okay, what can I do about it? Like, what's my role to play in improving things, even though I'm getting older? I'm a little bit, I'm a little bit over the hill, that kind of thing. Like young 28-year-old Batman, like Batman year 3, whatever you want to call it. That guy's got boundless energy and and a lot of optimism, right? Batman year 20, all these problems still exist. You could see the cynicism. You could see where you'd be like, what am I doing? Right? Can I and that kind of stuff. And him having to work through those things to not be a cynic, I really like that. I think so that was part of it. So yeah, so I like the older Batman that's more based on the Dark Knight stuff. I know Zack Snyder likes Frank Miller and those kind of things. I think that he does a crappy job of actually writing a good story around it, which is a whole nother thing. So I don't like those movies actually, but I think it's the best portrayal of Batman because he's character wise, he's more right than he is like off. He's doing detective-y things. Um, he is outsmarting people. He is he's also like he's not like the Christian Bale style asshole Bruce Wayne, which I really don't care for. Like the whole, I get that like that's part of a lot of the comics do like the Playboy Bruce Wayne. I don't think that that's necessary, and I don't really like that part of it. I get that it might be a good disguise if you were going to do this as a career, but I just don't like it. Um, and
That's
yeah,
actually
so there's
something I
that.
really appreciated that the Flash did with Ben Affleck, because he had that scene where he's acting as a mentor to Barry, and he
Right.
says that our tragedies make us heroes, but they also make us alone. And I thought that was really good acting by Ben
Yeah.
Affleck.
Yeah, no, I think obviously Ben Affleck. I think Ben Affleck is the best actor of all the people that. Um, Also, physically, he meets the stature of Batman better than like a Michael Keaton, like
Well,
who's
I mean,
you know.
it's not Michael Keaton's fault that he's only 5'8".
No, 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 it's not. But Batman's not 5'8".
Right.
Batman, like, and so like that is important. Like, I don't want a
That
five
was
foot
Tim
three.
Burton's fault for casting him.
Yeah, well, I mean, but Michael Keaton. I mean, Michael Keaton's a great actor, and so you
Yes.
can like. It's not like you know those movies are fun, but I think it's like the worst version of Batman in terms of accuracy to the character, not in terms of like how fun the movies are.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because like I mean, Michael Keaton's like pulling grenades and killing people and all this kind of stuff. Like he's just doing all kinds of stuff that like doesn't make sense. Like you didn't need to do that, Michael. You could have just punched the guy in the face, right?
Yes.
And so that it was just like it was just a week. Anyway, but Batman was being rebooted at that point, so I get it. Like in retrospect, I mean, and to be honest, the Justice League, like the Justice League, like Snyder cut is probably much better than it would have been because he had the ability to do a retrospective on what happened with the Whedon cut, right? Like I'm pretty sure that that was not going to be the product that we got had the Snyder cut come out originally. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have happened. I think that like he altered a lot of things um, in response to what didn't work in the Whedon cut. So
Well,
he had the
Snyder
ability.
didn't watch the Whedon cut, so it wasn't a direct reaction.
Well, but yeah, well, I think that's the story. I'm not sure if I buy it, but
Sure. I mean, that is what he said.
I know he said that, and I know that Chris Nolan and his wife both told him you can't watch this because it's awful. And so I know that's the story. I have my doubts, but either way, he got to see the reaction of the critics and everyone else saying what didn't work for them and various things, and he got a lot more time to think over what he was building. And so I'm pretty sure that, I mean, that was not the product that we would have got. Um,
Well,
and
no, it
like,
wouldn't. He would never have been allowed to release a 4-hour movie.
no, no, right. And so like he got a lot more leeway and a lot more, I think, perspective and time to do it. My issue with the my issue with the Snyder ones is, well, first of all, Batman becomes like Murder Man. In
Let's
the
just use
in
machine guns to mow
Yeah,
down bad guys.
yeah, exactly. Let's like latch. I'm just gonna latch a hook to this car and flip it around, and it's just gonna go flying into another car. And you're like, you just killed like 8 people. And so like, but that's Zack Snyder. So I can't blame Ben Affleck for that. So
No,
my
that's
favorite
writing and directing.
that's writing. I think that the older Batman, the wiser, more grizzled, more cynical Batman is kind of my favorite version. I do like the Batman Year One stuff too. The unseasoned has to learn on the job Batman is an interesting character to me as well. The least interesting one is kind of the in between, because he has, then that's when you have to introduce the interesting villains to kind of counterbalance and
And the
show
Bat
these
Family.
other things. Yes, exactly. So I like that. I like that Batman did detective-y things. I think that like the warehouse scene in Batman versus Superman is probably the best live action depiction of what Batman to do would do to regular people who tried to fight him. It's kind of like Arkham Asylum, just in the Arkham Bungie games in cinematic form, and I love that kind of stuff. I just love the idea of like this person, because part of the thing with Batman also is he's got all these gadgets, he can do all these things, he plans things out, but then also he's got this crazy armor, and he is like he's basically Captain America. And you just can't fight a person like that if you're a normal person. And so he's just gonna beat the snot out of 15 people, and it's just fun. And that was just like so. But like that's a thing that Michael Keaton, when he's like he can't even turn his head and those kind of things, like it was. I think that was the best one. I also hated the Christian Bale Batman voice so much. I thought that the electronic version that they did with Batman, it makes a lot more sense for the character, right? And you could more easily disguise your voice if you were using like an electronic modification. And Batman's kind of into that kind of stuff, and so it makes perfect sense for the character. It just makes a lot more sense. So like, I hated the Christian Bale Batman voice. Christian Bale also, I think, stature wise, bothered me a little bit. Like, I want Batman to be 6'3", not 5'11". Like, that's my height, right? I can stand eye to eye with Christian Bale. I want Batman to be intimidating, and to a normal person that would meet him. And so I think that all those factors combined, they didn't do a ton of detective stuff, but some of it. They didn't do, the live action parts I thought were the best. I like the older cynical Batman. I think that Christian Bale, um, sometimes sometimes the Nolan dialogue gets to me too. I'm a
You and
big
Bethel.
Nolan. I like Nolan, but his dialogue is just bad. And so there's some good lines in the Dark Knight trilogy, which is the still the best Batman movies for sure. And Robert Pattinson just didn't work for me as Bruce Wayne. And so
Interesting.
that's like I
So
like yeah.
so I like I said, I got into Batman with Christian Bale. As a let's see, what was I? I was 18 and I was in college, and I really imprinted on that. And here's the funny thing: I actually don't like the Dark Knight movie. I prefer both Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises
Oh,
to The
interesting.
Dark Knight.
I prefer Batman Begins. I think it's the best of them.
Oh
I
yeah,
think that
I definitely think that's the best of them because it's so thematically sophisticated.
I was shocked at how good it was whenever it came out, because I mean, we had been treated to a bunch of like a poo poo platter of Batman
Very
movies.
goofy
Yeah,
Batman movies recently.
yeah, like so like we had been treated to a bunch of nonsense before that. And so I thought Batman Begins, it was restrained also, like, it wasn't, um, in a weird way, and so, like, I don't know, like, I like that about the Nolan movies is how restrained the villains often are in terms of, like, their ambitions and what they're trying to do. This is no longer like this is not like the Avengers where we're going to invade the Earth and take it all over. It's
We're
more
going
like
to
they
lift the
saw
city in the air and drop it on the ground.
right. It's not like this is not a world-ending. Half the universe is going to die if we don't stop this event or something. So I like how restrained those movies are, and Batman Begins is definitely the best of the bunch. I think.
So talk to me about the Pattinson movie, because it got a huge response, but I also didn't really enjoy it that much.
It's one of those movies where I kind of liked it the first time, and then I rewatched it, and I was like, "This is not very. I don't really like this very much." I liked some parts of it.
Yeah, I
Um,
like parts of it.
yeah, but
I think Pattinson is fine. I just think his
I think
writing
he's
is
fine
weak.
as Batman. He was a
Yeah.
terrible Bruce Wayne.
Well, he just sort of sulks in his room as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, and he's got long hair. He just looks like an emo Bruce Wayne, and I was like, that just doesn't work. Bruce Wayne is businessman, right? Like that's businessman. If you want to throw in Playboy, you can. I don't particularly like that angle on Bruce Wayne. But yeah, like sulky, like just like I'm gonna go back to my room and listen to My Chemical Romance or whatever. Like it's like that's I was like that's the vibe I get from him, and I was like, hey, that's not a great disguise. I was like, everyone could believe. Could this guy put on a like? Could he go beat people up in the street? You're like, yeah, he could. He's probably mentally insane. And so like it's not even a good disguise for him. And just like it's mopey and like I don't know. Like I didn't like that. There were parts of it that I thought were interesting. Um I thought that the depiction of Gotham was pretty good in terms of like, you know, you had like, the original like Burton ones, like Gotham is just like this hellscape, right?
It's like
Like
this weird fantasy designed by a
yeah, it's like
1940s German.
yeah, this is like this not a realistic. It's not even it's just
There's not an
and then
attempt to make it realistic,
no,
which is
exactly.
fair
And it,
because Gotham isn't real.
no, it's not, but yeah, but I prefer it to be like,
More
you
real.
know, more real so that you can I don't even know how to immerse myself in that Gotham, right? Like what are people doing for a job in that Gotham?
Well, there has to be an entire industry of like 10,000 monument cleaners because
Right.
the city is 90%
Yeah.
monuments.
Well, that's the thing. And so like it's kind of like this is more believable as Arkham City. I don't know if you played the games,
I
right?
haven't.
No, okay. They're fantastic, by the way. I highly recommend them.
I've
They're
watched
really
some gameplay videos and it looks really
yeah.
fun. I'm just not a good.
Yeah, it's
I'm
more
terrible on
realistic as
console.
Arkham City, like an outdoor prison. That's what it
Right.
seems like, and so, like, I just can't immerse myself in there because you can't imagine ever living there with a family and all this kind of stuff. Like, it just wouldn't. It doesn't make any sense. So you have that. Then you have the Nolan versions. I'm gonna just ignore Schumacher because I can't
Well,
stand those movies.
Schumacher basically just took what Burton did and then painted it neon.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm just gonna no, I'm not. Yeah, yeah. I'm just gonna ignore those movies. Um, you lost me at Bat card, right? Like it is like at the point that Batman has a Batman credit card that he just gives. Like, I'm sorry, no,
I'll
stop.
get
Um,
takeout.
yeah. um. Anyway. So and then you have the Nolan ones, which is just a thinly disguised New York City, right?
Although I
Um.
should say that I have the Batman Forever mug with
Oh, I have one of those too. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, I didn't get that when it came out. I actually recently got those because I wanted
Oh, did
Batman
you?
stuff to
Okay.
drink
I
out
know
of.
I got it as a kid
I
whenever I
know.
watched
I got the
yeah.
Flintstones ones, but I never got the Batman
Okay,
one.
yeah. Yeah, no, I have one of those. They're fun. They're like I I also have like a Last Jedi T-shirt that I got whenever I went to the movie, even though I hate that movie.
But why would
And
you have that T-shirt, sir?
because no, I went to the movie and it was part of like the ticket because I was like part of like the initial screening at the theater, so they gave it they came part of the package. So like I got it. I will tell you, I wear it ironically. A, it is comfortable, so I like that. But then B, I wear it ironically so that when people ask me about it, I was like, no, let me lecture you for 20 minutes about why that movie is awful. And
Well,
so
that
like
sounds like we should do another stream about that.
yeah, no, oh goodness, I could rant about that movie and the Rise of Skywalker for many days on end. Um, so like the Nolan ones were like a thinly disguised New York City, right? A
Well, the first
corrupt.
two movies are Chicago. The last movie is New York.
No, but like it's kind of like it's just it's that city, right? And so it's like a
Generic
corrupt
American super metropolis.
super metropolis, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not. So I did like the way that they shot and showed. I thought that they did a better job in the Batman about the dual nature of um, the the classes in Gotham in the Batman. So you have this one that's like super like you can contrast the super luxurious Gotham that's like corrupt and taking advantage with also the like the doldrums and the ports and all that kind of stuff. I thought that they did a really good job about that. So um I thought that was fine. Um I thought that Robert Pattinson, I disliked him less than I thought I would when he was Batman. Um, when he was Bruce Wayne, like we've talked about, I had no use for that. Um, I thought that the story was really weak. And again, I'm not into the whole like the Wayne family is corrupt thing, and so that's kind of like I just didn't like that. The chase scene was fun. Um,
The
sure,
Batmobile scene was the best part, man.
that was the best part for sure. It was. I don't hate the idea of Bruce Wayne early in his career trying to learn that if he's always just vengeance, he's going to scare everyone, not just the criminals. So I think that that's what they were trying to go for, right? At the end, whenever like he was rescuing these people and they were afraid to get his help, right? And so like he had to I think that that was what they were trying to go through. It didn't really land for me though. I don't think that it really had the resonance that they wanted in the
I think the
story.
problem is that the arc they wanted to tell, they didn't write strongly enough, and they made the movie too long for it to land.
Yes,
That movie was
exactly.
way too long.
It was, yes, for sure. It needed to be shorter.
Half an hour
Um,
shorter.
and you know, again, I don't hate the Riddler.
That
I
character was Hush. That was not the Riddler.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't. I mean, that was yeah. The Riddler's kind of like a one of the campier Batman villains, but I'm okay with that because like the Riddler's kind of like a B level villain, and so like I was fine. I'm fine with you rewriting some of these. Like if you made the Joker a prominent businessman or something like that, you'd be like, you're not writing the Joker. The Riddler, I'm okay with you rewriting. It's fine. Like I think the Riddler's kind of boring if you do the Jim Carrey style campy stuff. And so I'm fine with that. Although I will say that I think the Riddler in the internet age would be the least effective villain in the history of the world.
Googling answer to riddle.
Yes, well, yeah, you just be like, "Hey, I got this riddle," and you post it on Reddit, and within like, within 40 minutes, you've got like a bunch of people who have already figured out the riddle, right? It's not like it would be like the least effective way of performing crime I think I could think of in the internet age. In the 70s or the 80s when you didn't have that, then maybe you could make that work. But I was like, yeah, Reddit would solve that in about in less than an hour. So I don't, so fine. And I
I
actually
will
think that they
say that
did.
my biggest problem with the choice of Riddler is that a Riddler plot always has the same structure, which is that The Riddler is the one taking all the action, and Batman is just reacting and following the
Right.
Riddler. And a good Riddler story will have Batman halfway through the movie figure out what's going on and make his own plan. This
Mhm.
Batman never figured it out.
No,
Riddler
he
got
doesn't.
everything he wanted,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
and that
like
really
Batman.
irritates
Batman.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Like at best, Batman just helped prevent greater destruction, but like
Batman was basically just like extra FEMA in that movie.
yeah, right, yeah, no, exactly. I will say I didn't hate the Selena Kyle
Yeah,
portrayal.
she was okay,
In that
except
I thought she
they
was
leaned a
fine.
little too hard into the rich versus poor stuff for me with her
Of course.
dialogue, but the
Yeah,
actress was great.
yeah. No, I thought I didn't hate her. I thought that she cast like a good balance between femme fatale and then capable, thief, fighter, that kind of stuff. And actually, see, this is the thing. I hate when they lean into the billionaire like class warfare stuff with the Waynes. Um, but I think it fits with the character of Selena Kyle that that's how she would see things.
Well, I mean,
I
Anne
mean,
Hathaway does the same thing in Dark Knight
yes,
Rises.
exactly. She does. Yes, there's a storm coming and that kind of stuff. So like that's very much like you guys have lived too fat and too rich, and we're going to come for it. Um, it fits her character, at least to see it that way.
I
I
just
don't
don't
think
trust the filmmakers to understand that it's the character and not the filmmakers speaking.
exactly. You need to make this like you need to portray it as especially when you're also simultaneously portraying the Waynes as being corrupt. You're kind of reinforcing what she's saying.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's the thing. Like you need to undermine it with a counter narrative that can be her perspective. And you can just leave it at that, and that's fine. But it needs to be like balanced by something else where she's like she's only seeing part of the story here, and she's being in some ways like maybe selfish or myopic or something like that. And she just doesn't do a good job of it. So I mean, like, but it's the writing. Like in these, again, I don't think they know how to write these characters. I don't think that they grew up with them. And in some ways, it's like a J.J. Abrams problem with Star Wars. Like I don't think that. Like I honestly don't think. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy's a whole nother thing, but like J.J. Abrams like has admitted he never really liked Star Trek. So when he rewrote Wrath of Khan, he got the characters wrong, right? And um and I just don't think that these people know how to. I don't think they were fans of these characters. I think they were fans of the work, like they might have liked the movies, but I don't think they understand why the movies worked and why people loved them and why they're resonant. Even years later, you can watch. I mean, I just watched the original Return of the Jedi with my kid a couple days ago, and he's 7, and he loved it. And I was like, he's not. He's you. I dare anyone to rewatch freaking the Last Jedi. I dare you. Like you can't. And it's because you got the characters all wrong.
Well, and I think that the problem that you're diagnosing here for Batman is that in this political age, the writers and directors of these movies are in a bubble. And that's why you see things like Blue Beetle, where a character says Batman's a fascist. No one who likes Batman would write that and use it as
No,
marketing for your movie.
no, no.
No,
Well, and it's not even subversive. It's just outright propaganda,
it's
right?
it's it's agitprop. It's the kind of
Right,
thing you see in a
exactly.
1920s Marxist play.
Well, and here's the thing with the Nolan movies, which was kind of subversive because Nolan was, in a way, kind of critiquing a lot of what happened in like the Patriot Act and those kind of things, with like the wiretapping laws and everything else like that. And he's putting Batman in that place to give him that moral dilemma, right? Of do I do this? And then Alfred saying this is wrong. No one should have this power. And then not Alfred. Sorry, it was
Lucius.
Yeah, Lucius was saying this is wrong, and I'm going to resign. I'm not going to be a part of this, and that kind of thing. And then, like, but then you saw that Batman realized the problem and then had the machine destroyed. And it's explicitly Batman realizing his the challenge of being a tyrant and declining it and saying,
Sort of a
yes,
George
that's
Washington
bad.
moment.
Yeah, exactly. And like no one would write Batman and say, "Oh, he's a tyrant," and actually like write the character that way. Like Batman could be a tyrant, and he's constantly fighting that temptation.
Hmm.
That's part of his problem is that he's too powerful, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
and
why like in
yeah.
Batman in the what was it? The oh, what is the Justice League one? The Justice League one where he essentially Ra's al Ghul takes his plans to disable all the other Justice League members.
Oh, Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel, yes. I was like, that's the power that Batman actually has. That even the Justice League would be at a disadvantage if Batman decided to go after them. That's the power of both his obsessiveness and the fact that he's that rich and smart, and so he's constantly having to fight that. And that was like that, and that's the debate at the end, between him and the Justice League, is they're like, we can't trust you, you crossed the line here. um and he was like, I mean, essentially he's like, yeah, maybe, but you guys could become tyrants too, and if you do, I'm worried about it and I need a plan for it. And so it's still him like recognizing the dangers of tyranny and unchecked power. That's Batman's character.
Well, and it's
Um
also, I think, very Calvinist in
yeah,
that Batman believes that humanity is totally depraved.
yeah.
Like, and I love Superman. I came to Superman much later, and actually, it was Batman versus Superman that got me to fall in love with Superman. But Superman represents the ideal of basically a man who's mostly sanctified.
Right.
Batman is a man who knows he is totally depraved and is
Yes.
trying to take steps
And
against
and
that.
exactly. And that's why like the Frank Miller like battle between Batman and Superman makes so much sense. Like it matches their characters, right? Because Superman is so good, he's borderline naive sometimes about how he's being used, right? And Batman is saying, no, like you can't give in to them. And so he fights him, but not to kill Superman. He could have killed Superman in that fight. He chose, he deliberately planned the entire fight so that he would beat Superman, not kill him, but then fake his own death to teach Superman a lesson that you can't trust these people, right? And to teach Superman a little bit more humility in like you need to be careful about when you go around like just enforcing orders on behalf of the government, because Superman's truth, justice, and the American way. And like you've got the president giving you orders and you can't blindly follow them just because you don't think that the people giving the orders are necessarily bad. And Superman was a little bit naive about that because he thinks everyone is as good as he is. And Batman's like, no, that's not true. And I'm not like so anyway, that's why that's a fascinating fight because it matches both characters. It doesn't make either of them look bad. Um and and it teaches like kind of a moral lesson of you need to be careful about human depravity. And they're like you can't just like blindly trust people and follow orders and that kind of stuff. That's not an excuse. And so it just matches their characters so perfectly um, to do it that way. And that's why I love that. I love that fight scene because I was like, Superman's not a bad guy. He just thinks everyone's as ethical and as morally pure as him. And if you because he's morally pure, but he's not omniscient.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. And so if you're morally pure but not omniscient, you can get taken advantage of because you think everyone's like you. And that's not true, right?
So I'm wondering, have you read All Star Batman and Robin by Frank Miller and Jim Lee?
Yes. It's
Uh,
been a while. Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that story?
You'll have to remind me of the story itself. I know I've read it.
So it's basically it's a new universe, so it's not in continuity with regular Batman, but it is in
Okay.
continuity with The Dark Knight Returns. So it's the story of how Batman met Dick Grayson, and it's very over the top. Like
Yeah.
there's a scene early in the comic where Vicky Vale's getting ready for a date with Bruce Wayne and is just like underwear all over the place, lingerie, and just
Mm.
it's very over the top. And the whole story is very controversial because Batman, he swears all the time and he's constantly beating people up way more than like the crime deserves. So like someone's littering
Yeah.
and he just beats him up.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's been so long since I've read it, so I don't really know the plot. I remember that some of the later Frank Miller stuff after he finished The Dark Knight, the original Dark Knight, I did not like. And so, yeah, I mean, I like if we're gonna talk about his stuff, like there's some things that I like. 300 I thought was a pretty cool like graphic novel, and but the original Dark Knight was really good. Yeah, but I would have to like reread it. It's been so long that I've read that one, but probably because I didn't like it is my guess, and so I just
Fair.
haven't
I,
revisited it.
I didn't like it very much either. I was just
Yeah,
curious because it is Frank Miller, so it gets brought up a lot in
I know.
conversations.
Yeah, like I mean, I'll
There's kind of
I'll
two Frank Millers. There's pre 9/11 Frank Miller and post 9/11 Frank Miller.
for sure. Yes, that is true, and um, yeah, yeah. I honestly wasn't a huge fan of most of his work, after he did the Dark Knight Returns, graphic novels. Like, a lot of them I thought were, like, weird stories, and they I felt like he was, like, constantly trying to top himself and make, like, a more scandalous story as he went on, and it just I'm not interested in that. There were other things, and he also kind of like launched a rebirth of other Batman and Superman stories and that kind of stuff that I liked, and so that other people wrote that I thought were better, and so I don't know if you read the. I mean, if you're a big Superman fan, have you read um, the Max Landis American Alien?
I have not. I've read a few issues of it, but I haven't read the
Okay.
whole thing.
Okay. You should read that. I really liked that. I think that Max Landis is actually a guy who actually gets the character of Superman pretty much spot on.
Wish he
Um,
lived like he understood it a bit better, but yeah,
well, whether or not his personal life is reflective of that, but I think he gets the character
sure.
really well, and he writes characters I think really well.
Yeah, I've
Um,
actually liked most of the movies I've seen by him. I just haven't read that particular one.
yeah, so no, I think that like no, you should read it. It's really really good. It's probably one of my favorite ones that have been written in the last I don't know 5 years. It's really fantastic. And yeah, I think that you know another thing. So another thing that could be explored is just like the weird friendship between Batman and Superman is a movie that hasn't really been written. I don't know if they were trying to go for it with Batman v Superman, but you're like, you guys hate each other for like 95% of this movie, and then at the end you're BFFs and whatever, and it's just there's no arc. Um, and those kind of things. And so I think that's another thing, just the relationship aspect of what it's like to be Batman, right? And like how Bruce actually looks at things because he's extremely loyal. Um, he's extremely like disciplined, but he's also kind of like he can come across as cold and those kind of things. And so and like kind of a loner. So it's kind of like a lot of people feel like, Dick Grayson got mad at him a lot in the comics and those kind of things, because a lot of times it can feel like unrequited love when like it's obvious that Bruce it's obvious that Batman does care for these people. Um but it's also obvious that they don't feel that, which is also just a very fascinating thing. Like how many people's marriages or parent-child relationships can feel like that, where I really deeply care about you, but you don't feel cared for. Is also like a very interesting thing, and I feel like that's a lot of the problems with a lot of marriages, a lot of parent-child relationships, is that one side feels like they're not being they're not being loved. And then what's it like from the other side to be the one that is constantly being, like, what is that like from Batman's perspective, right? And so that's a very, like, we all know what it's like to feel unloved, but to explore the character from the perspective of, no, now we're going to talk about what it's like to really care and love for someone, and also not have that person feel loved by you. That's a very interesting, I think, character development story that you could tell with Batman. You could tell it with Robin, you could tell it with Batgirl, you could tell it with Superman, you could tell it with Commissioner Gordon, right? You could tell it with like any of these characters, um, because Batman has all these relationships, and in some ways they're like way deeper than a lot of other characters have. Um, and it's just like we never see that, we haven't seen that side outside of the comics most of the time. We've not seen like a live action version of that, right? Um, and so that's but these are very interesting stories that you could do. It's just that people have no imagination, or I don't know what or they're just like so focused on trying to subvert something that they can't like take 2 minutes and just like think, what's an interesting story to tell about Batman that doesn't make you hate him, but just like explores some of his flaws, right? Um, and that's what's interesting about Batman. It's his flaws. His flaws are the fascinating thing about him, right? And how he tries to constantly conquer them, which is a very, again, this is like a very like you said earlier, like it's very like much like a pilgrim's progress. Like it's one step at a time, like conquering obstacles to get to the promised land of the kind of person that you want to be. And every villain that Batman's face is that. Every like relationship that he tries to develop is that. Every failure is that, right? Like Jason Todd devastated him. He kept Jason Todd Robin suit in his Batcave as a reminder for what could happen if he lets people down and he doesn't sufficiently protect them. That, like, he very deeply cares, right? He's not a sociopath. This is another thing that annoys me when people describe Batman, is they're like, oh, he's just like a cold sociopath. You're like, no, he's not. Like a sociopath does not take mementos of a fallen comrade to remind himself never to let that happen again, the way that Batman does. He does not, like, that's not something that a sociopath does. Like a sociopath just says, well, we lost we lost one, I need to replace them, and then they move on, right? And then they recruit someone else. And that's what a sociopath does. That's not Batman. He's not that. Um he is he is kind of like socially broken by what happened with his parents. Like, that's an interesting story. We all have that. We all have like baggage that we're carrying from our childhoods or past relationships or whatever. And that's what's most fascinating about Batman, is that he's confronting in some ways his demons head on, in a way that I think that we all kind of wish that we did, but we don't often do. And that's what's fascinating about him, and why he's just a character that I gravitate toward, because I was like, He's making all these mistakes along the way, but he's trying. Like, he's not giving up. Even in his more cynical like modes, he's not doing that. And I don't know, it's a very Christian story, in a
I
lot of
agree.
ways. And and a lot of the imagery, even in a lot of the you know, the Batman comic books and, games and animated series and all that kind of stuff. They're such it like a lot of them are set in churches. A lot of them have like the Gothic cathedral look and those kind of things. Like, it's very much like intentionally done that way because it holds gravity. And it makes sense for the character. Anyway, that's why I love it. And because it's just like there's so many stories you can tell because Batman is us, right? In a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, he's what we could be if we tried harder, right? If we tackled things harder and more directly. And that's what's awesome about him is that he's he's literally fighting like demigods and demons and all this kind of stuff. And he's just a guy, right? Using what he was provided with to do the best he can. And I love that. I love that story. That's a story every little boy, like, when they see it, they're like, "Yeah, I wanna be that," right? It's just great.
So, as our last question, do you have a favorite either idea or story that is the end of Batman? So, Dark Knight Returns doesn't count as the end because he actually continues going.
He lives, yeah.
So, do you have either a story that actually exists or an ideal story that you wish someone would tell about how Batman ends?
Okay, I'll do both. There's one story that I actually don't hate where Batman dies, that I think is pretty good. So there's one story, I can't remember the name of the comic, we could, like, look it up, but it's one where he and Joker basically, he realizes that this battle between him and Joker is going to rage forever. Um, Long story short, I believe they both got like poisoned with something, and
I think this is Europa.
yeah, maybe yeah, I think you're right. And so eventually, Batman decides to essentially destroy the antidote, and they both die. And so it was kind of like he knew that Joker is kind of he like all of Batman's villains to some extent are his alter ego or like some demon that he's fighting, but Joker is really the the one um that best depicts it because again it's the tyrant order chaos kind of thing. So I think that he realized that Joker was just going to keep going. He would keep going and going and going if he saved him this time, but also like he didn't want to kill the Joker. So anyway, I think that he destroyed, if I remember correctly, I think that he destroyed the antidote. He dropped it and spilled it, and then they both died. Um, um, Saying, I'm not willing." Again, this is the anti-tyrant thing, right? He's saying, I will not inflict on you something that I will not take, right? And so, like, he forgoes that option of saving himself and killing Joker. He also forgoes saving Joker at that point because it was getting too destructive. It was costing too many lives. And so I don't hate that. I think that that's a good one. The ending, I mean, the Dark Knight doesn't count because again, he doesn't die. Uh, he just kind of moves into the underground. There's one idea that I actually want to write, like a screenplay for. I've never written a screenplay, but it's one where again it's kind of playing off the idea of the relationship between um, Clark and Superman. It's playing off some of the same themes as the Dark Knight, namely Superman's naivety. Um, and so the idea is it'd be like a Justice League kind of version of it. An idea that I have where Superman um, Superman decides. Well, Superman. is kind of framed for an intergalactic crime, and the Green Lantern Corps comes to arrest him, essentially. And Batman is telling Superman, no, don't do it. You didn't do this. Don't accept like this. We can fight the Green Lantern Corps off. Like we like just don't do it. And Superman, because he's ethical and good, he's like, no, I want my day in court. I want to prove my innocence. I want to do these kind of things. And so, um, anyway, long story short, turns out, so they take him away, but turns out that the Green Lantern Corps, through probably like Brainiac or someone like that would make the most sense, is being they're being manipulated and kind of like mind controlled. And so Superman's locked in essentially a kryptonite prison, or somewhere where they depleted his powers, and it's not within range of a yellow sun, so he doesn't have the powers. And so he's in a jail cell. Meanwhile, Brainiac moves in with a big army to invade Earth and take it over, right? Because he wants Earth. And so the rest of the Justice League is fighting and everything else. And Batman has this dilemma where he's like, do I save Earth? Do I go for Clark? And the rest of the Justice League is like, listen, we can try and find Clark later, but like right now we're fighting these spaceships, like Wonder Woman, everyone else is fighting all this kind of stuff. And so long story short, like Superman, and Batman basically decides to go after Clark. But he's doing it for friendship reasons, not solely because like partially moral, but partially friendship reasons. Like you would have like kind of like, I would put like previous scenes of like important moments in each of their lives where they were there for each other and that kind of stuff leading up to this. And so basically Batman was like, listen, I'm not sure that we can fight these guys off without Superman, but either way, I'm going for him. And so he decides to go for it. He rigs up, and so basically he infiltrates this like interstellar prison that's a long way away and that kind of stuff. He sneaks in. It's an infiltration mission. He's hiding. He's like sneaking in. He eventually finds Clark. And what happens is he fashions essentially like a little sun device, basically, that releases the same radiation as our sun does that gives Superman his powers, but it's like a concentrated version. And he's like, take this, and then break out of here and go save Earth. And so basically, long story short, Superman's keeping in his hands to block the radiation from Clark, or from Batman. And, basically this is like a concentrated dose of the sun's radiation. So Superman at this point is more powerful than he's ever been in his entire life. And then like he immediately just like out the door goes, defeats Brainiac's stuff. If it was like cinematic, I would have the John Williams dun 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 dun. I'm hitting all the notes, right? But the damage to the ship is catastrophic, and Batman ends up dying, but also saving Earth and saving his friends. And so that would be the way that I would write Batman. That it's a self-sacrifice for the sake of other people. And so I think that that's the way that Batman would go out. Is doing something like that. It would have to be catastrophic. It would have to be like last resort or realized. So I think that the Joker ending is pretty good in that regard. But like that's the idea for like a game or like a comic book or something like that I've been thinking about. But I think that would be true to Batman's character too, is that he figured out a way to both save Earth and save his friends, even if it cost him personally. I would write Batman's exit is that, and then a funeral afterward. And eventually returns, finds his body, brings it back to Earth. You have a funeral. That would be the end of Batman, and then probably have Nightwing take over. Like probably have even Batman have like a plan for what happens when he's gone or something like that because it's very Batman to do. And then this is a note for Nightwing, similar to the way that Nolan ended it, where Christian Bale like passed it off to Robin, right? And then Robin's going to take up the cow. I would probably do something like that with Nightwing. Is, hey Dick, now you're in control. Alfred's been briefed. Like, take it over. And then like that's the end of the Bruce Wayne story. Anyway, that's how I would do it. Any thoughts? Any feedback?
I think that's I definitely think that the idea of Batman dying in self-sacrifice is a very good one. And certainly better than a lot of ways that DC has chosen to kill him off in other verse stories
Yeah.
recently. um, I My personal favorite story of Batman's ending is actually in Tom King's run from 2016. He wrote a future story in one of the annuals. It was the second annual of his run,
Mhm.
in which he marries Catwoman, has a daughter, and trains her to be Batwoman, and of course has the rest
Mhm.
of the Bat family. And then he dies. He retires and dies,
Okay.
and he's surrounded by his family. And the being surrounded by his family is why that's especially moving to me, because he saw his parents murdered in front of him, and so him being able to die with his family
Mhm.
just feels very powerful to me.
Yeah. No,
And you could actually get
that's
the same thing with the self-sacrifice, because you could have Nightwing and you could have Batgirl with him as he makes
you
that
have
choice.
Damian if you wanted to include Damian in that
Yeah.
story. Yeah, so you could have like he would be surrounded by those people. Um, but it's kind of like again, like Batman's all about opposites, right? So it's it would be an interesting flip because he would be dying to save his family as opposed to for a really good reason, whereas Joe Chill was killing for a trivial reason, someone else's family. And so I think that I like the symmetry of a self-sacrifice for Batman because I kind of feel like he's just the kind of guy that's going to go out with his boots on. And it's going to be like one of those things. And so like the Frank Miller version, I don't hate because you could see that, but like that's the kind of thing like um I just don't think that he's going to go out um without being a fighter to the end. I think he's always going to want to do that. I guess you could like work it in where he like yeah, he trains, he operates, he's kind of behind the scenes like helping out and so he's still doing stuff and helping, but he's no longer the crime fighter that he once was and that kind of thing. So you could so like yeah, I don't hate that either. I think it's important for him to go out with his family because again, we want to invert the story of him losing his family. And so I think that him going out with his family for non-trivial reasons is a nice counter to him losing his family for very trivial reasons. Like Joe Chill wanted a wallet and some pearls, and that's it, which is trivial in the end of the day because he's just going to blow it on drugs or whatever. And this is like a momentary fix for him, but he takes away a person's family for it. And I think that like him going out, he has to go out with his family for sure. But I think that I actually think that like the Tony Stark style, like I didn't hate that the way that Tony Stark went out in Avengers Endgame. I liked that part of his character arc, right? And you know, finally he was willing to sacrifice and he went out with family and those kind of things. And so and then with a lot of people that really admire him. And I think that that's the right way for Batman to I think that's the right way for Batman to go out. He needs to go out with family for sure. I like the sacrifice angle just because I think that you could do it in an interesting way. And then also, my goal in that story arc that I just pitched was for also you to see the depth of his relationships with some of the people that he was closest with, like Superman. And so it would be like Superman struggling with his relationship with Lois right? And Batman coming alongside. It would be a lot of like very character and personal life driven dialogue and development, setting up the fact that when Bruce made this decision, this all informed it. And he had very close friendships with a lot of people that were very deep and meaningful, to both him and them. And so I think that that's what I would want to get out of that story. You could also write that same story without him dying, right? And him surviving, and then Superman coming back and rescuing him, right? Because somehow Bruce has managed to, like, stay in that cell, or hide himself until he goes out. So you don't have to make him go out that way. But if I was going to write something to have him go out, I personally like the self sacrifice angle of it, because it just inverts his entire story, right? And it kind of redeems it, right? Um, he was broken because he lost people, but then he was redeemed because he saved people. And I think that's a beautiful kind of mirror. To It's a beautiful mirror of like the crucifixion, right? Like he who like wants to keep his life will lose it, and he who like loses his life will save it. I think that that's like a very beautiful one, and I would definitely have the funeral in a church, and have all that kind of imagery in it, because I think it matches so beautifully with that story.
Yeah, for sure. I think I mean this is none of these stories are going to happen in
I
modern
know.
times, but
Yeah.
like as an alternate future, I could definitely see that being a good ending to the Batman story.
Yeah. Well, if anyone from DC ever listens to this, can you call me so that you don't have like people writing Batman who don't understand Batman? This is crazy. And call Ian, like bring us in. I'll do it for free. I'll just like do it for free and just like read your
Are we breaking the
screenplays.
strike? Are we scabs?
I don't care. Like I don't care. I
I mean,
just
I'm
don't
not a
write
union
bad
member,
stuff.
so
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care. I don't believe in those things anyway. So like, yeah, just can you call in people that love these characters and understand them, and aren't just trying to subvert all of their characters and be like, actually, Batman was kind of bad. Actually, the Waynes were kind of bad. Actually, Superman is kind of a maniac and wipes out half of New York without a. He doesn't even care. And it like Man of Steel was shocking to me. By the way, whenever I saw that, I was like, so we've just had like 109/11s happen in like a series of like 15 minutes. And then at the end, Superman's not like saving people. He's like making out with Lois Lane in the rubble when all these people are dead. Are you looking around right now? This is not time for a romantic kiss. I don't understand what you guys are doing. Superman would not do this. Doesn't it, a human wouldn't do this. This is crazy. Anyway, but these people hate these characters. I honestly think that some of them actually hate the characters. And then some of them, I just don't think that I think they're so interested in propaganda, that they just don't even care. I'll change the character, whatever. Luke, he can be bad now. Why not? The most optimistic person in the history of cinema is Luke Skywalker. Like he's literally believes in his father, who's a genocidal maniac that killed like children. They wiped out planets, and now, whatever. I can't. I don't care anymore. But so I think that they hate these characters, generally speaking. But then also, I think that they're just like so fixated on propaganda that they can't even see a good story. Um, like I don't even think they care about the characters. I don't even think they're thinking about the characters. I think they're thinking about what's my message, right? And my message comes first. Um, and I think that that's one of the reasons that we get such bad stuff. I will say that the DC animated stuff is way better than the Marvel animated stuff. And the DC animated stuff is not bad, by and large. Like some of it is not great, but most of it is okay. It's pretty good. These would be better movies than what you're writing for actual DC movies. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, but no, I'm not hopeful. I'm not putting all my. I don't. James Gunn, I like. a lot of his movies. I was shocked at how much I liked Guardians, for instance, like, and some of those movies, but I don't know. Like, I don't have much faith that he can write DC right.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
I mean,
we'll see. Yep. All right. Well,
well,
this was fun. Yeah.
yeah, it was great. Thanks so much for being up for it, and we
Yeah.
definitely have more things to talk about in the future.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, we can do a separate Star Wars one and stuff, so that would be fun.
Yep. All right. Well, have a great night,
All right.
Trip.
Thanks.
Bye.